Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. I am Hannah Broderud.
And I'm Chris Province.
And I'm Luke Freeman. And we are partway through season 5 of the podcast. And this season, all of our loyal listeners will remember, we're talking about what skills do we need if we lead a team. So we spent all of season 4 talking about what is intentional leadership. And now we're really applying it to, okay, you lead some group of people. What are the skills that you need? So we've talked about trust. We've talked about commitments, accountability. How do you build those in a team? And we've talked a lot throughout about this idea of letting go of finding your value as a producer that does things yourself as an individual to put out into the world, a service, a product, and finding your value in the work that other people produce. It's hard. It doesn't happen overnight. Lots of leaders also have to produce things, and you got to do both for some time, but it is hard. It doesn't happen on accident. We have to really manage ourselves, lead ourselves, question our own beliefs, values, work on our ego, all the things to be able to make the transition. And we have to learn all these new skills. And today, the skill that we're going to be working on is communication. And man, so my background is team building, right? I did a lot of team building for a lot of different groups and continue to do it today. And the joke among facilitators that do team building activities, or if you're on a ropes course or you do whatever, is that you do an activity and then you say, hey, everyone, what happened during the activity to help us be successful? And 9 times out of 10, someone in that group is going to say, communication. And that's the answer. And we laugh about it in the field, but it's because it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. People look at what helped them be successful. We actually talked to each other and we had to get this done. But there are skills to communication. There are techniques, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Like all of our episodes, there's a guide you can download at magicintheroom.com. For communication in particular, there's a really helpful graphic that I strongly suggest you look at. We'll probably reference it in today's episode, but it really helps outline kind of the work that we have to do in taking just all the data that's out there in the world and actually turning it into intentional communications that move the needle and help people make decisions. So that's our topic for today.
Man, I'm excited because communications, all the research that we have, obviously there's multiple ways in which we communicate, but we can talk about when we communicate, was it effective, right? So how effective are the communications that we deliver? 75% of leaders think crazy effective was good. What do you think those direct reports
nailed that meeting.
Right? And direct reports say reply at about a rate of 30 to 35% that it was effective. So there's this going, there's a through line with leaders in that we think that we communicate, and the people that report to us report exactly the opposite. Mm-hmm. The leader thinks, man, I am a great communicator. My team knows what's going on. They know the direction we're headed in. They know what we're supposed to do today. They know how we're supposed to go about our business. Mm-hmm. And those direct reports, the team members doing the work inside the organization, no, that is not the case. Mm-hmm. And it's domain after domain within this discipline. Mm-hmm. But let's start by naming it, work through some terms of reference. So what is communication? What is effective communication? Let's pull some thread on that. What do you think, Luke?
Yeah, communication, the ability to understand how people prefer to receive information, tailor that information to folks in ways that effectively conceptualize, clarify ideas so that we can move to action and alignment in action. So to me, it's, I start with this idea of understanding how people want to receive it, how people need to receive information, because that's 90% of the work. We know the data usually that we want to convey. And so all of this challenge in it is like, okay, well, I would say it this way. But guess what? That's only, according to the stats Chris just shared, 30% effective. So
Right.
I got a lot of work to do to make that 100% effective if that's my goal.
Yeah, another way to think about communication is turning data into wisdom that is actionable, that we can make decisions about. And I think for leaders of teams, which is really the context that we're looking at this today, is creating shared understanding. So how do I create shared understanding amongst a team, amongst an organization? And we can look at it in other contexts too. Anytime we are responsible for leading a group of humans, so that could be our family, right? And communication is one of those things that's always being cited as you mentioned, the thing that leads to success, but it's also the thing that leads to a failure of most relationships. There's some kind of communication problem, communication issue. And I think it was George Bernard Shaw who said, the problem with communication is the illusion that it has occurred. I'm paraphrasing, but we make some assumption that because I put some information out there, I provided some data, I provided some information, now communication has happened. But really, in the transaction of communication, there's a sender, there's a receiver, and there is a message. And communication has not happened until that message has been received by the receiver. So, and my mind goes to you and I, Luke, were on site with a client a while back, and we had this conversation about payroll. And a payroll person said, well, every month I send this report via email, or when somebody's eligible for this next benefit or whatever it is, right? And I put it out there. I know nobody reads my emails. They all go to spam, but I send them. And so
it was a great moment.
It was a great moment.
Hannah and I were just like, smile and nod, smile and nod.
Yes.
Right? Our job's not to fix this right now here today.
Right.
But great.
But the illustration is, well, I communicated because I put the information out there. No, in fact, you did not. Communication has not occurred because the message has not been received.
And that's, I think it's helpful to think about communication as an exchange, right? So anybody out there that's into the whole leadership theory thing, we've got that idea of leader-member exchange. Now, maybe that's one-on-one. Maybe that's team-based, maybe that's organizationally, But it is an exchange of information from the leader to people that need it to align activity with the goals or objectives of the organization. So this exchange of information that happens in communication is really just one piece that creates organizational energy. But through communication, we get to talk about resources. Like what resources are needed, where might we have some resources that could be leveraged, what are resources that we might retire, right? Things that maybe used to offer value, but no longer do. We only get to these things through communication and also that exchange that allows for contemplation, the exploration of ideas that elevates trust, that may emerge commitments or new things that we want to bring to whatever market or community that we serve. And it's these things that are so pivotal in creating organizational energy, in like allowing us to move forward with velocity that isn't otherwise attainable. So if you want to go fast, you have to be an excellent communicator.
Yeah.
because we have to bring everyone, right? And
Well, it's the whole point of leadership. If you want to do your own thing by yourself, don't be a leader.
Right.
But the whole point that you're in this supervisory positional authority role is that we are harnessing the power of a diverse group of people to do something that none of us could do on our own. And like communication is just like, it is the nervous system of this object that you have created by pulling those folks together and becoming more than the sum of your parts. And we cannot operate, as our human bodies could not operate without our nervous system, right? That's ludicrous. How would the hand know what to do? How, all the things. It's just such an easy metaphor. But when we hear a leader say, well, I sent the email, I know it went to their spam folder, but I did my part. It would be like saying, well, I know that my hand is asleep, but like, no biggie. That's just how it is. That's how this body operates. Like, no, it's a problem, right? Unpinch that nerve. And this, I think owning that communication is central to leadership it is a mindset issue that we have to grapple with. And again, we talked about this in the last episode. When leaders say, well, if I'm not building the cabinet and I'm a supervisor, like, what do I do? What do I spend time doing? Like, well, guess what? Now you're not the muscle, you're the nervous system. The nervous system is working all the time, right? There is plenty to do.
Absolutely. So question, Hannah, is wisdom an event or a state?
I would call it a state. I think it's a creative process that requires some experience because there's a lot of contexts, right? We talked about, and maybe we'll go more into depth in this model, but we talked about this idea of, information flow and how we create shared understanding. And I kind of think of it as a way to look at intentional leadership of noticing. I'm noticing there's some data here. I'm picking up some information. This requires individual learning and me doing something with that. And then I can make choices about what I'm going to do about that as a leader. And then if I'm intentional about the choices that I make and how I share and communicate that information, it can become wisdom that enables action. And I don't think that's an event. I think that's an ongoing state of mind of always having that in mind. Like, I'm not just dealing with data here. I'm creating shared understanding to enable others to take meaningful action, or myself, but it kind of becomes a guide.
Yeah, I think wisdom is powered by insight, right? And our shared understanding, our discussions or contemplations around what it is we're looking at and how we understand the world or our market or our product or our community. But looking at those things, building the shared understanding, and with that insight, being wise enough to make quality decisions that move us forward. So like effective decision-making, back into the role of communications, maybe effective decision-making relies on a state of wisdom that is supported by an intentional framework within organizations through which people can transform data to shared understanding using the process that moves it through, taking the data, processing that to information, moving that information to a group so it becomes knowledge, and then spreading that knowledge to create shared understanding. Like, that's the process that will be in your guides that you download for this episode. You'll see how we move data to shared understanding. And also, think there's an element of within that intentional framework, and Ben, if we can, let's put that in the guides as well, those 4 meeting types, because when we're communicating, we make administrative communications that are brief. We make tactical communications that are about the tasks that we have to get done. We make strategic communications that are about where we're going maybe this year and a little longer roadmap. And then there's developmental communication where it's that time and space for deep contemplation about the future of us, whatever that us may be, community, work, business, etc. But Luke, when we're really trying to get shared understanding, and I know we just did not too long ago, we did a data-driven storytelling education multi-day workshop, and we got to explore a lot of things as we built that out and delivered it. But what can a leader take to a team? Like, how do they put information or their understanding together to help create shared understanding within a stakeholder group?
So first, there is a skill set to be mastered, right? So I'm going to break this down into 2 things. One is the ability to deliver effectively, like the skills it takes. And so I would say those are, we need to understand our presence. We need to understand, do I stand or do I sit? What do I do with my hands? To quote the great Ricky Bobby, I don't know what to do with my hands. We need to know what to do with our hands. Like, we have to master our presence virtually on Zoom call, in a room with folks, however it shows up, in a written word. Like, what does that page look like? And how is it delivered? Is it bullet pointed? What's the font? What size is it? Right? These are all part of just our presence and how people experience us. It needs to be intentional. We need to notice, how am I showing up now? What do I need to do to show up better? We also have to hone the actual message. So what is the main point of what we're getting across? So if I understand my presence, if I understand what is the message that I'm trying to deliver, then I need to understand, how do I get confirmation that delivery has happened? So when I deliver this message, what feedback loop am I building into this to ensure that the message has gone out there, right? So that's kind of the how. And I think when we think about how do we make sure that we're effectively doing it tactically, we have to, those just are like breathing, right? I understand my presence. I understand really clear what I'm trying to do here. And I know that I'm going to know if I've been successful or not. Now, tactically, the other pieces are, what is my plan? How does this message fit in the overarching communication plan? How does it fit to our strategy? How does it fit to objective that supports our strategy? What is the thesis of what's most important for my team and how this communication fits into that, right? So it's part of an overarching communication plan. That doesn't have to be written, right? But do I really understand, like, the game that I'm playing in communication of this piece? What's the right tool, right? What the medium is the message. Is email okay? Does it need to be a video? Like, if I have a dispersed workforce, like, what's the difference between me sending out bullet points in an email versus me sending out a video snippet every morning, right? I would need to understand what the right tool is. And then, do I have the structure to support my message? Do we have an existing meeting cadence that enables me to get done what I need to get done? So if I take the how, which is around my presence and, all of that good stuff, I'm a good communicator, and then I understand the tactics. Do I have the right channels? Do I have the right cadence? Do I have the right tools here? Yeah, I think you bundle all that together. Practice over and over and over again.
Sure. And there's so much art in selecting what are the right tools for this particular communication, because obviously I need different tools if it's a one-on-one, even if I'm doing it in my office versus doing the one-on-one in their office. But understanding the conditions under which you're going to want to have this one-on-one. Do you sit behind a desk? and allow the person to sit on the other side of the desk, or do you sit at a table? It depends, right? Like, we're the artist, we're the creator. Like, how do you want this communication to be received? If I want to maintain a power dynamic, I'm going to remain in behind my desk while the other person is across from my desk in my office. If I need them to feel empowered, I'm going to go where they are, right? And I'm going to give them leverage for this communication. If I want to forge and get side by side and not have anything contrary, then I'll get around a table. But the tooling I'll take to that would be different than the tooling I take to an all-hands meeting.
Yeah.
So when we're telling a more public story or making larger communications, and maybe it's in even a stakeholder report or something we're shipping via email, I do want to call out 3 things that are really helpful. Like, when we're making a public communication, or more broadcast or published sort of delivery, we're going to use 3 elements to build that communication. Those 3 elements, we're going to have the data that informs our narrative. So we want evidence, right, to show kind of that full logic and give a through line to our story. But we're going to show our data. We're going to do that with visualization, right? So we want to select proper visualization, and we're going to build a story. So we have to create the narrative that goes along with our with our visualization and the source data that we're using for our logic. And if we do that, we're more likely to compel than when we don't have appropriate visualization or we don't share a story. So again, speaking to, like, these are skills. Like, understanding a story arc is a skill.
Yeah.
Building appropriate visualization is a skill, and processing or internalizing data that informs action is a skill.
Yeah. And underlying that, why that is effective, is the knowledge and understanding of how the human brain works, how we internalize information, and how that becomes knowledge and wisdom in the mind of the receiver of that communication, right? I mean, we are hardwired for following storylines. Like, that is how our brains take in information naturally. We are not naturally inclined to remember information that comes from a spreadsheet. Yeah, there are people who love spreadsheets and spend a lot of time in them, but hard facts and data is not how our brain remembers and retains information and turns that into creative insight, right? That happens through story. And the right visuals can help us do that, right? And different visuals, I think, appeal to different learning styles, but creating that visualization that it can help you see the relevant elements of all those data points, and then sharing it through a story that follows the arc that really is how our brains evolved from oral storytelling, remembering things through certain rhythms that come with the story. Like, it just helps us
This is all too much work.
Yeah, right? I know.
Everything that we are saying and everything that you're saying is too much work, and I'm going to throw a temper tantrum and say that I don't have time to do it. So, like,
so you're just
help
going
me with that.
to
Coach
throw
me with
all
that.
your facts up on your slide and say, here.
I'm not even going to do that. We're all going to,
Tell
like,
people what to
I'm
do.
going to say, hey, everyone, come over here for a minute. Hey, here's the 3 things you need to know. Get back to work. Like, I don't see how this can work. So I'm being facetious.
No, you're
you know?
not. No, you're
But-
not.
Like, give me some coaching here.
Now, here's the problem, is the people on your team, Luke, do not identify or align with directives. So you can direct their activity. In fact, it's even in your title. It says director. Like you can direct the members of your team to do whatever you like. You have the titled authority.
I'm pretty
and
sure
the
it's
power
my
dynamic.
job. That's what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
To tell people what to do?
Here's
To direct.
here's the real challenge, right? Is people don't relate to the orders and directive that you give them. They only relate to aims and purpose and goals and things that we rally them around. So you being able to relate what's important to us as an organization and represent our organizational beliefs as someone we sponsor to do this with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're going to relate to. And they want to know you're in it for them and that you're in it for this organization and that we can provide their career vibrance and their positions are sustainable and we're going to keep moving in a positive direction as their responsibilities increase throughout their career, just as yours has. Maybe, is that decent coaching?
Yeah.
How'd I do?
That's pretty
So-
good.
Speaking of coaching, I mean, this is why coaching is such an effective tool and why we call it the language of leadership, because it is the kind of communication that enables the creative process of learning to happen in the mind of the people on our team, right?
Mhm.
Because learning, knowledge, wisdom is a creative process that happens in the mind of the learner. And when we think of communication and learning as a creative process, we approach it a little bit differently. So back to the earlier analogy, just because I put the information out there, I told you what to do 5 times, I sent it in an email. So now I've communicated,
Mhm.
right?
You didn't get the email?
Oh, that's your fault.
Yeah.
But yeah, recognizing that in order to create new knowledge, whether it's individual knowledge or shared understanding on a team, that is a creative process that new knowledge doesn't happen until those connections are made in the brain of that person. And what coaching does, the helpful tool with coaching is that it uses questions rather than directives,
Mhm.
right? So when we ask questions, it opens up the ability for that brain of the other person who's listening to activate and think and make connections that lead to insight. And so powerful questions that lead to insight, that is one of the most helpful tools in coaching. And as leaders, if we want to make sure we communicate and create shared knowledge, that's one of the tools.
So 5 stars on that kind of call out, right? So if really what we're after is shared understanding, insight, and wisdom, coaching is the practice.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you'll notice too is even in Luke's negativity in his director role, which we're going to change his title, right? Even he's like, no, like too hard. Help me understand. Well, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
The invitation to help him understand.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing when we, certify, educate, and elevate coaches. Someone that understands coaching is also more likely to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Help me understand. Tell me more about this. Like this is when they're looking up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when they're leading up the organization. So there's all kinds of benefits of that. Do you have you want to give us some more input on that whole process?
Well, I just want to break it down because I think why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do this work? For those of us who move into a leadership role, I think understanding that we're playing now with the human brain, we've touched on that a lot of different ways, but I just want to give an example. So previous episodes, we've talked about that inner cave person. Got a whole episode interview with Annette Taylor back there in the archives. about our inner cave people. And like, that's the brains we're carrying around. And I want us to imagine the leader of a clan, like on the eastern steppes of Europe, prehistory, and they're following migratory animals and surviving. There's a big difference from that person saying, hey, whenever you're not tanning hides, I want you to go throw rocks in the river right there. And they go out and they hunt for the day and they come back and like, no one's throwing rocks. They're like, I told everyone to throw rocks in the river. Get after it. Like, why? That's ridiculous. Right. But if the person says, you know what, 3 out of the last 7 seasons when we've been here, this river has been almost dry and we've had to dig to find enough water. And I'm worried about what's happening. And I think we could solve that problem if we create a little bit of a dam and let this create a natural pool so that next year when we follow the herd back through this area, we'll be good to go. Right. We're getting close to running out this year. So in between stuff, if you can, let's just right here, let's try and create a little wall and dam, and it's going to build up over time. And like, great, right? Way different scenarios. But for some reason, you know, and if we were a part of that clan, we're like, of course we would. Yes, we want to do that. It's for our own survival. But for some reason, we think Director Luke, we get in that position and we're like, why should I have to tell the story of why we're throwing rocks? People are so entitled. They're so needy. They complain. I don't get it. Why can't they just go throw rocks whenever they're tired from tanning the hide already? They still need to listen to me and do what I say. It's ridiculous. We are now playing a leadership game, and that means we got to tell stories and we got to bring people along. So another way to say this.
And so we're dovetailing that, like the ability to be an effective communicator, dovetailing with trust, right? Like sharing logic creates trust. Hey, I'm in it for us. I want us to always have the resources we need to do what we have to do.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't want us to have to spend 10 days digging for a resource that we can create today for next year.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm in it for you, sharing of logic, showing up as me. Those are relatable things. And another piece that I want to call out and talk about before we wrap up for today is this idea, in Luke's director role, he can certainly say the 3 things and be done and say, go throw the rocks. The challenge, though, is any gaps that Luke leaves in his communications about what's going on or what should be understood gets filled with a person's own agenda, with their filter, their beliefs, their values, their sentiment about the organization, or worse yet, the sentiment about Director Luke, right? So like if Luke has that approach, which is, kind of cynical, too busy for this, not going to lead this way, thumb their nose at what science knows, right? And if you leave those gaps, they're going to be filled. That individual is going to write their own story with information that you did not give them, I did not give them, is most likely untrue. So what risk does that create?
All the things. Like someone saying, and I'm going to just stick with our story, man, my arm's sore from tanning this hide. I'm going to stop when it's halfway done and go throw rocks because whatever. Like people not understanding levels of priority because they don't understand we're doing something for a year from now and the hide has to get tanned today. Or someone saying, I heard that there's a monster under the water and we're trying to bury it. So I'm going to find the sharpest rocks I can. Well, that doesn't help build it. Like there's just all this crazy stuff that people start doing because of a rumor, or their brains are going to create a story no matter what. I mean, that's the thing is like the story's going to be there. Are we just letting it happen or are we telling it? Because like we can't help but make the story. If someone gives the 3 bullet points, if Director Luke, the bad guy in the story apparently, gives the 3 bullet points,
He was
and doesn't
the lazy
tell a
one.
story, there's still 20 stories in the minds of the 20 people who hear the 3 bullet points. The stories just pop into existence. So anytime I am not telling the story, I am saying whatever your 20 stories are as to why these 3 bullet points were worth me saying today, I'm cool with that being the story. Go for it.
Yeah.
And I know we're getting close to wrapping up, and I'm going to go from like super practical with the cave people story to super philosophical. But the litmus test for me is that my job as a leader is to create shared consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we have shared consciousness as a team, it's mystical, right? It's a
like
mystery.
Magic in the room.
It is like magic. But we've all been a part of something where we have that tacit, unspoken coordination with a team that is almost spooky, right? Where like the team creates this consciousness that is somehow independent and bigger than what our little pieces that we brought to it are. And we know when to zig and when to zag. And you see it on the best sports teams. But like my job as a leader is to create that almost spooky shared consciousness. And this is maybe for a future episode, even thinking bigger, like bigger than my team. If I'm a really good leader, if I'm ready for that next level, I'm thinking, how is what I'm doing with my team creating shared consciousness with the organization that we're a part of, and this coordination across this entire thing? Because only when we have that shared consciousness and we're all on the same page do we truly have agency to move forward and execute on our strategy and our priorities. So that's the litmus test. Are my 3 bullet points, bad director Luke, are his 3 bullet points creating a shared consciousness that enable next level performance, real agency about where we are going as a team? Or do they enable the 20 stories that are being told in everyone's heads? That's not shared consciousness. So,
well, first of all, good for you, Director Luke, for only having 3 bullet points. I mean,
it's supposed to be 20, and no one knows which of the 20 is most important. They can only do one today, right?
Yeah. To make this real practical, for me, one of the big leadership behaviors that is every leader's responsibility, also every follower's responsibility, right? But we're focusing on leadership here, and that's clarify and seek clarification. So that means as a leader, how clear can I be in my message? How can I pare it down from the 20 bullet points to the 3, but then take that a step further to seek clarification on how is that landing? How is my audience receiving that information that I just shared? Are those 3 bullet points really internalized in a way that can produce choices for the best way to implement them and meaningful action that moves our purpose forward? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And so for me, that's like a theme for me this year, looking at all the different areas of my life that I can clarify something or where I need to seek clarification. And that means asking for feedback. That means asking Luke, some more specific questions about, okay, this one bullet point that you said, when you say that, what does that actually mean? Like, what is the outcome that we need to strive for so that it can inform my actions and choices and commitments that I make?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What else? Get us out of here.
It is hard, right? Play acted a little bit because it's really hard. Not too long ago, we did strategic planning with our team, and all of the communication that had to happen, and parts of it that we got right, parts of it that weren't clear. It is just days and days of work. Mm-hmm. And I think for any leader, like, to recognize that it is days and days of work to create the shared consciousness required to do something different than whatever the current system is creating, whatever is currently happening, like, is real. But it's also almost this, you can cut this, I guess, but almost like this holy endeavor, like HOLY, like it's almost like this holy endeavor that you get the opportunity to do as a leader, to create a thing that did not exist before. It's like having a baby a little bit. Like, when you're responsible for 8 hours of people's lives together every day, or whatever your context is, it is a holy endeavor to say, are the words I'm saying, the priorities I'm communicating, the consciousness that I'm bringing into being, the shared consciousness of this team, that's somehow different and separate from any one person that's on it. I could switch someone out, right? Joe leaves, Tim gets hired in, but this thing that is created is still a thing that's somehow alive. Like, it's big and weighty and pretty cool, and isn't to be done lightly, and is worth, like, it is a lifetime's worth of work. And so for folks listening, like, it's a big deal, and it's exciting, and it's a honor to be a leader, and don't go it alone. Like, we need each other to be the best leaders we can be. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. And so I'm going to take it and say it's a holy endeavor, WHOLLY, because I can't do anything without it.
Yeah.
I can't activate a purpose. I can't create value congruence. I can't show support. Other people can't participate. I can't inform practices to make them more fair. Therefore, I can't engage people in my ability to grow, develop, capture revenue or market share or interest from any community or market is thereby constrained. So it's non-negotiable, and it affects every part of performance.
All right.
Final thoughts on today?
I mean, I think we communicated pretty well. This is just it's a huge topic, communication, right? So I want to encourage everyone to just think about that. As a leader of a team, try to put yourself in the team members' shoes. What are the questions? What are the gaps? Recognize that anytime we leave information out, the brain's going to fill in the gaps with some kind of story. And because our brain's propensity or bias towards negativity, it's probably going to be the worst case scenario. And it's probably going to have all kinds of fear, uncertainty, or doubt associated with it. And so how can we plug those gaps and be intentional about the stories that we create as a shared consciousness for our team, and also the stories that are created in the minds of the team members, right? So that story is aligned with our purpose, with the things that we've committed to do together, and how can we make that come alive? And how can we just become wiser as an organization, as a team? It's fascinating stuff, and it's never ending.
Let's go get after communicating. I think there's one more thing to communicate before we go.
Yeah. Download for this episode is at magicintheroom.com. In particular, we have a visualization of going from data through these steps of information, knowledge, shared understanding, and ultimately creating wisdom in an organization. So I think that'll be helpful to you. So magicintheroom.com. That's it for today.
All right. Magic in the Room is hosted by Chris Provins, Hannah Broderud, and Luke Freeman. It is produced by Ben West. Social media management is provided by Emma Holland and Maggie King Robinson. Our theme music is by Evan Grimm. Find his music on Apple Music. This episode was recorded on site in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. Find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com. You can find previous episodes at magicintheroom.com.